Hey guys, welcome to the Babbling Pastors podcast. This is the last. What?
Welcome to the Babbling Pastors podcast.
This is the last episode in the line of episodes that we are doing in regards to Christianity in relation to. This podcast is going to be about life and death. I know that seems like a huge subject, and it definitely is a huge subject, but we're going to try to boil this down into a couple specifics and how life and death are different. I need to use some inflection there for Christians, and how that should look different. That should look a whole lot different. And I think we've demonstrated part of that through the previous podcasts we've done, as far as on ethnicity and race, marriage, relationships, money, and all of that. So we're going to boil it down a little bit more, boil it down into generalizations and not specifics probably in this one. So I'm probably going to give a couple life examples, not necessarily my life examples, but examples I've seen in other people's lives to demonstrate that. But before we get into that, what do you have to say to start us off with, Pastor Rob? Don't look around. I'm pointing to you, buddy.
Well, I jokingly said it in the last episode, but YOLO actually makes sense here.
Oh no, the phrase.
No, I think that is a very real thing that is. So we're talking about Christianity in relation to, or as it relates to, life and death, and how that might differ from, or should differ from, the world around us, right? And when you look at the world, what you're going to see is more than one thing, but there's either the person who doesn't ever think about it, which is probably a lot of folks. Mm-hmm. There's the person who actually lives by the whole YOLO idea, where it's like, do whatever you want. I'm going to die. Might as well live it up, kind of a thing. You could go on, right, with the different things, responses, ways people look at it and live. But none of them have actual lasting purpose, right? The closest that you're going to find to that is, some sort of scientific discovery legacy, or something that you want to leave to the people in the future, or whatever, like your family, or but even that in and of itself is empty. What are you going to leave your family that's going to be that, we're witnessing right now a time in history where people are rewriting history, right? So all those forefathers, all those people who discovered all these things, and the things that have made us a nation and a people, that's all kind of being tainted and changed and written depending on the narrative you want to spin it right now. So all that to kind of say, it doesn't matter what you do, right? And how you live and what kind of legacy you want to leave, unless it transcends time. Then that's what Christianity is. That's what Christians do. And sometimes we don't live like that, but that's the way it is.
Yeah. Well, I think if we want to point to, like you said, if it all comes back to, and I think I've said this before, maybe not on here, but I know I've said it in sermons before, that if I leave anything to anybody, what I want them to leave is the hope in Christ, this gospel that we have, because that doesn't change. That is still true regardless of what society you're in and what that looks like. So, and I've had some wonderful people that I've been able to see do that. So for example, there's lots of them, but one of them specifically is my grandpa. Like, that dude did not, he grew up in a time that was, well, like all times, it's got some issues with it economically, depression wise, just the upheaval as far as everything that was going on with in relation to race in his day, and lived it, as far as I can tell, in a way that glorified Christ and that pointed to Jesus. the entire time. Like, even no matter what that difficulty was, that's what it always pointed toward. And that's what he wanted his life to be about. So much so that, like, I didn't know this until his funeral, but every single Sunday that man stood up and testified about what God had done in his life. And you think, well, that's kind of pointless because, I mean, these people were here last week and they're here again this week. And for whatever reason, he wanted to make sure every Sunday, if given that opportunity, he was able to stand up and tell people, like, I know you've heard this before and you may get tired of hearing it, but Jesus transformed my life. And let me tell you one way that happened. Now, this is also about life and death, right? So in his death, like, I remember, and again, everybody dies differently, but he was in the hospital for a long time when I was in college. And I remember seeing him a couple times that we were able to drive down and go see him. But even he had a lot of dementia there at the end. Didn't know who people were. Wasn't even conscious for a lot of it. But he was, as far as mumbling and saying things. And I remember the two times I was there. Both times he wasn't conscious. He didn't know you were in the room with him. But in his very soul, like, the gospel was so deeply ingrained in who he was sitting there singing hymns or mumbling hymns. I mean, you really wouldn't call it singing, but I mean, he was repeating the words of these hymns that he had sung his whole life and that were so deeply ingrained that no matter what happened, even in death, he was suffering well for Jesus. Like that, out of everything he could have said in that bed, not knowing where he was, not knowing who he was, that's what came out of it. And I'm not saying that's going to be true for everybody. I'm not going to say that, that's the litmus test for your spiritual walk. I'm just saying that in that instance, that's how he was dying. That's what was left of him. And I know that's happened to quite a few other people as well, that when they're dying, even of whatever this horrible disease is, or this cancer, or this situation they're in, even in their death reflects their life. So they've lived for God. And even in this cancer situation, they say, even though this is horrible, even though this is bad, no matter what happens in this situation, I'm going to point it to Christ. So he heals me. He heals me. If he doesn't, he doesn't. My life and my death are going to be to glorify him. And I mean, I have countless examples of that. That's just one example. And I think that's the difference for those that follow Christ and those that don't, is that our life is all about him, and our death especially is all about him and how we die well.
Yeah, I think everything that you just said, I think there's a guy that I'm talking to. I'm supposed to hear from him later this week or beginning of next week. And he just Thursday, this past Thursday, found out that he has lung cancer. It was diagnosed, and it's a for sure thing. Mm-hmm. He's already on oxygen, has been for years, as long as I've known him. And so very real possibility that he's looking at the end of the road at some point here soon. And he was here Sunday, and I was talking to him briefly, and I just kind of asked how's he doing, emotionally and mentally and stuff. And he said, you know what? I have peace. He was like, whatever, essentially, that it's kind of whatever happens. And there's just this sense of peace. Like he knows, man, all you got to do is look around at some stories, lung cancer, any kind of like, it's not cool.
Mm-hmm.
Probably going to be going through treatment that's going to suck. You're not going to feel good. You're probably going to be throwing up or, some kind of reaction. Most people have that going on. The end of your life almost always isn't that beautiful, he fell asleep and didn't wake up thing.
Yeah.
I mean, that's one way out of about 1 billion, right? Mm-hmm. And so it's almost always some horrific thing by the world standards of how you go out. And for him to be able to see that, be faced with death by itself, even if it weren't a suffering kind of thing, is a scary thing, right? A little bit. Mm-hmm. But him to be faced with that, and not only that, but the suffering in death, and to be able to look at me in the eye and say, you know what, I have peace about it. That's a distinctly Christian thing. Mm-hmm. Or you're so blinded by something else you believe that you can maybe get there, I guess. But man, to be able to sit down and look at what's next and know that it's probably death. I mean, I'm 35. That's a reality that I don't think about nearly as much as, maybe I will in a decade or two or whatever. I don't know,
Mhm.
but it's something that, like, come the end, right? When I was in Afghanistan, I mean, I thought about it more then, but it's I think you worded it well when you talked about you live for God, you live for the glory of God, and you die for the glory of God. I mean, that's really what sets it apart. The life of a Christian is filled with purpose, and not just some purpose of a legacy or a monetary gift to your children you're leaving them, but a legacy that is everlasting and eternal. In any life that you throw the gospel into, if they forever forget your name, your legacy is forever,
Mm-hmm.
and an eternal forever and ever difference. And so your life filled with unequaled purpose, and your death, man, I think some of the most powerful testimony and story is when someone either is suffering really by the world standards in this crazy way, or dying in a really difficult way, and they just love Jesus anyway. You know, that speaks more volumes to people than any amount of me being healthy and having my bills paid and telling someone about Jesus.
Mm-hmm.
It's worth so much.
Well, I think it comes down, especially in that circumstance, right? So what you're saying as far as, so let's talk about the death part and then we'll kind of back up because I think,
Yeah.
and then we'll talk about the life thing. But I think the death thing, when you're able to die well, it really demonstrates to everyone else that Christianity is not this, transactional process, right?
Mm.
So lots of times it's presented as a transactional process. I do these good things and I get rewarded with this other good thing. Where Christianity is not a transactional process. You could be the most devout Christian ever and die a horrible death. I mean, martyrs all the time are a great example of that.
Mm-hmm.
These people are very good, even by the world standards. They are good, but they die at the hands of evil people. But the idea here is that it's not a transactional thing, and you can say that, and you know that in your bones when you're in a horrible situation, going through it, knowing that your God is still good, and that's demonstrated so powerfully and such a great witness to everyone that witnesses it. Okay. I mean, another great example is that my wife's grandpa had a horrible, I mean, he had a stroke and he suffered for years after that before he passed away. But one of the most, for me, powerful things, because I didn't come from a big family, a good, huge, powerful, and I've told this story, I can't tell you how many times during a sermon, was that right before he died, all of his kids were in that room singing hymns. The dude didn't know you were there, but they were singing hymns in this hospital room. We're talking about 9 kids.
Mm.
That's a powerful witness to that hospital floor. Okay. Like the people that don't know who God is, saying, what is this? Because they see people die a lot. I mean, that's when they come to that nursing home, the reasonable outcome is this person ain't got long to left. So whenever they, you witness that, there's something, no matter how depraved you are, that says, what's different about that? Because I've seen people die and it doesn't look like that. And it's just such a powerful witness that when you do die well and you've left this legacy of Jesus, that no matter how you die, like, and I'll just, without going into details, it was bad. It was not pretty at all, but they were able to praise God despite of it. And I think that's where it goes back to, you can't expect to die well. And that's why I want to start with the death thing. You can't expect to die well unless you live well.
Yeah.
Because you can,
Sweet.
I mean, it's not like, well, I'm just going to do whatever. And then I'm going to, at the very end, I'm just going to die really well. Like that dying well is built into you through the living well part of it. And understanding that. And I think that's where it comes back to why it's really important to have, I mean, let's push back to previous episodes, right? This idea that you have people preaching the gospel to you, keeping you accountable, holding you to the biblical standard, so that is built into you. That just doesn't happen, right? This is why sanctification is so important. Like, you're not just perfect one day. It's this continual built-in process where brothers and sisters are speaking into you. The Holy Spirit is working through them to do that. So that, for example, I mean, lots of people will say, hey, I knew this guy 10 years ago and he's different. What's different? Well, it's Jesus. That's what's changed him, right? And you're not going to be able to die well unless you live well and have that built into you. So
Yeah, I completely agree. That's a really, really good way to put it too. And I can't imagine any human being longing for that day when you are in that hospital bed in lots of pain, crying and in anguish and afraid for the next moment in case you die alone. Like, nobody wants that. There's no one on the planet sitting around going, man, I hope someday I get to suffer and die alone, a terrible death, not knowing what's next. And like that, I'm sure you could probably say there are exceptions to that rule. I mean, something as obvious as the thief on the cross, right? Like, but that is such the minority when you think about people. I mean, it's no secret. Like, I haven't had to do a funeral yet here, but I'm gonna. I mean, it's gonna happen. And I can tell you the ones that are going to be a lot easier to, even for the families, are going to be the ones where, hey, dad was a believer and it was obvious. He loved Jesus, not just, I had one of the funeral homes called me here in town. It's been a couple weeks ago or whatever, but asked me if I would be willing to just do a short service because there was a family in town that had lost a baby.
Ooh.
And the baby was getting cremated, and they wanted someone with some sort of Baptist in the name.
Okay.
I'm assuming, I don't know the details. I'm assuming just someone who is affiliated as a kid or something with Baptist church or something. And anyway, long story short, I couldn't do it for the sake of other things that were going on. But that is not the kind of, obviously it's a baby, it's different than what we're talking about, but the family that is around, right? Not knowing them at all. I know by the call that it means they weren't a part of a church. It probably means a lot of things, right? But that's not what you want a funeral to be like. Hey, I don't know how to do this. Call so and so. Maybe someone cared enough to, you know what I mean? Like you, and that I've been a part of those, right? Like where family's not sure. I've been a part of it where I've been to a funeral too, where there's funerals are a tremendous opportunity to share the gospel. They just are. And if the person lived a godly life, it's much easier to do. If the person did not live a godly life, you have to pray a lot and
yeah, that's a lot more difficult.
Yeah, hope that there's an opportunity for you to say, look, but this is a reality. Everybody's going to die. And, I've been to a funeral where someone was baptized and went through a confirmation in their denomination, Lutheran. And don't hear me say that all Lutherans are like this, because they're not. But this particular situation, the guy was everything but a child molester for a decent part of his life. Terrible person. And the gal up there, they ordained women pastors, and she was up there at the funeral speaking, and she referred to him as brother. Like the whole 9 yards, like he was just this perfect saint of a person because he was baptized. And like, he didn't die well. He didn't. He died as a jerk, as kind of like no one has wonderful memories of him. And I won't forget that. Like that's not a cool thing to that's not a good way to go. On the other hand, I've been a part of some of them that are just the opposite. There was a funeral at our church a few months back, probably 5 months ago or something. And man, this gentleman had MS for years and years. And he and his wife were just this ridiculous example of marriage and loving one another, and her taking care of him after he really couldn't. And anyway, he passed away, and I didn't know a funeral could last that long, because people just thing after thing after thing was said about him. People who I'm not sure knew Jesus at all were up on the stage talking about how much this guy loved Jesus. Like that. You nailed it on the head when you said you can't die well unless you've lived well. People don't know you were a Christian if you become a Christian in the last minute. Now, you still have the same benefits, right? Like you're at the feet of Jesus forever and ever. But the legacy that you leave is going to be vastly different if you're, not the person who says, okay, well, I have cancer, I guess it's time to get serious, right? But,
well, and that reminds me, actually, what you just said there reminds me of that sermon review we did of Jeff Vanderstelt, right? Where he had, or maybe it wasn't the one we did, but I know it's one that I listened to, where he was talking about witnessing to the lady next door, she getting saved, her son or daughter coming to the funeral and saying, look, I don't know anything about you, but I want to live next to you because my mom, whatever you guys talked about, changed her life so dramatically that I want to be in vicinity of that, whatever that was. And I think that's the powerful thing of the gospel. Like you said at the beginning, it's one of those things where, I mean, technically somebody that doesn't know Jesus could be like, well, I'm at peace at dying. But I think part of that quote unquote peace comes from the fact that they don't think there's anything after, so they're okay with it. Like, so, nothing's going to happen. So whatever, it'll become blackness and I can be okay with that. And that would be the only false peace that they have because they don't think there's anything after that. But what does come with living a life devoted to Jesus, and again, we've talked about this before, you're not going to do that perfectly. But the idea is that when you get to the end of it, everybody goes, they pointed to Jesus. In the good times, they pointed to Jesus. In the bad times, they pointed to Jesus. In their failure, they pointed to Jesus and went to him. And everything they did, and I've said it time and time again, and I hope it can be true of me when I'm dead, that my kids were so tired of hearing about Jesus that that's what they remember is Jesus. Because like you said, nobody's going to remember your name 2 generations after you're dead. Maybe even a generation after you're dead. No one's going to really remember you or know you. But they can feel the effects of that life and your death and what you pass on through that. And how you live and what that looked like. So I think, all the things we've talked about are very important and they're very specific. But I think in a more generalized term, Christianity as it relates to life and death is so transformative that it really is told. And again, this isn't always the case, but I'd say for the majority of the case, it's really how you lived is totally told by how you die. Because, and again, like you said, it's really easy for people to stand up at a funeral, even of a dirtbag, and say all these wonderful things. In fact, the other day I told my wife, I said, whatever, I'm obligating you to the fact that when you stand up at my funeral, because I'm assuming I'm going to die first because I'm far less healthy. I said, whenever I'm dead, I need you to stand up and just say, this guy was a dirtbag, because I need somebody to be honest at my funeral and not tell everyone that I was this wonderful individual. I need them to stand up. And I said, I love you. And you know me better than anybody else other than Jesus. So please stand up and tell everybody that I was a dirtbag of a sinner, but because of Jesus, because no one else is going to do that. Please, somebody stand up at my funeral and say that guy was a horrible individual and tell the truth because nobody else does. But
yeah, no doubt. I think that bottom line for me, as I think about Christianity in relation to life and death, I think that Christianity, biblical discipleship, following Jesus, that is the only actual clear understanding of life and death. everybody else just searches their whole life long for this meaning and what is it all about, and they fill life up with arbitrary, go to work, go home and play, go to the bar, their life is about all kinds of other things, but not because they've learned that that's what it's supposed to be about, or that's what it's all about. And Christianity, following Christ, understanding I'm made in the image of God, my life is supposed to be about blah, 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 and living that out as best I can, failing big and then repenting big, all of that stuff, man, and is invaluable. I'm not on my deathbed, right? But I can say without hesitation that if I die before this airs, I'm okay with it. Like there's peace there, because
Yeah.
I know what's next beyond any doubt in my mind, and I'm actually excited about it.
Well, it's the whole Paul's, to live is Christ, but to die is gain. So I can stick around here for all y'all and preach if you want. But if I'm dead, I'm totally cool with that too.
Yeah, right. Because it's not too hot in heaven. Right?
That's a tagline of some random horrible Christian shirt somewhere. Not too hot in heaven. Somebody will make it. I guarantee you. There's so many. Anyway, that's something I was saying.
You're a mean guy. Use that. Yeah.
Yeah. I'll pass that on to somebody else. All right. Well, hey, that's a good way to end, because I was sitting there going, man, this is heavy. How are we going to end this one out? Just remember, everybody, it's not too hot in heaven.
Yeah.
You have anything else to end that? Other than that, just that beautiful tagline of a bumper sticker that needs to be made.
It's not too hot in heaven. I think, man, just the Christian life and the Christian death is actually about something. There's actual real meaning there. It's not a big mystery. And I think there's so much comfort in just that. If nothing else, that alone is profound enough when you think about it in depth that it should make someone think about it, about Christianity, about, checking this out more, I guess.
Amen. All right, guys. Well, that was the last episode in this series of episodes. Come back for the month of August, because even we don't know what we're talking about yet. And find out.
We've been doing this half a year.
I know. I saw that the other day, and I was like, whoa. This is, yeah.
Talk about leaving a legacy.
Yeah. Half a year of podcast. So I'm leaving my kids all the revenue coming off this baby. And be live like kings, queens.
Yep.
You know how much I made off this podcast? $0.
Yeah,
but
probably negative, because
well, I guess I have bought stuff for it, so I guess you're right there. But like an intern, I've been paid an experience, and that's what really matters.
Yeah.
All right, guys. We'll talk to you later, and get out there and get that bread. Get paid in experience.
Yeah, happy babbling.
Bye. Oh, hold on. No.